Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would talk about this little video and this little topic that I found very particularly interesting. And today, we're going to review yet again another video by the channel known as Boxing Ego. And this is going to be the conversation, of course, and apparently, according to, I believe, an ESPN reporter by the name of Mike Coppinger. Now, I don't necessarily know how true it is. I do think that more than likely he probably believes that this is going to happen, but we don't really know how likely it is. But apparently, of course, Mr. Saul Canelo Alvarez, it is in recent reports that instead of possibly facing Mr. Jamal Charlo with the PBC, that he actually may take a two-fight deal with that a Matchroom or DAZN, whatever they call it when it comes down to it. And apparently the first fight that he may take would be that of the light heavyweight champion, I believe the current WBA light heavyweight champion, Mr. Dmitry Bivol. And then after that, of course, he could face the most recent IBF middleweight champion, I believe, and of course, the former nemesis of Canelo Alvarez, Gennady Triple G Golovkin. And I think that overall that would be a very interesting two-fight deal. I think that the Dmitry Bivol fight would be an excellent fight. I don't think that Dmitry Bivol is probably going to be as popular as an option as what a Jamal Charlo would be, just because I think Jamal Charlo, from a monetary perspective, I think all in all that he's worth more money, obviously. But when it comes down to it, Dmitry Bivol, just in terms of a talent, and just in terms of actually having a legitimate chance over Canelo Alvarez, in my opinion, Dmitry Bivol is a much better fighter than what Jamal Charlo has ever been. And I think that all in all, not only with his size, but with his talents, I think that he pretty much would have a much better chance over Canelo Alvarez than what a Jamal Charlo ever could have and overall ever would. It just is what it is. But anyways, Mr. Boxing Ego is going to talk about this, and it's going to be very particularly interesting because we're going to see what he has to say about this. Is he overall happy that Canelo Alvarez is moving on from Mr. Jamal Charlo? Because Canelo Alvarez, according to Boxing Ego, the only reason why Canelo Alvarez was taking the Jamal Charlo fight was because Jamal Charlo is now a weak fighter, a quote-unquote weak fighter. Basically, which is, the narrative that these guys try to pull out of their ass. And when I say these guys, I'm talking about some of the LDBC and especially new media channels. It just is what it is, and I've been telling people over and over and over again, and a lot of people, of course, they may disagree. All these guys are, when it comes down to it, is a pro-black cult. It just is what it is. That's not me trying to offend anyone, but that's what they are. It just is what it is. You can tell with the fighters they support. You can tell overall with the things that they say. You can tell with the certain fighters that they try to tear down. There's a reason why they try to tear down Canelo Alvarez on a constant basis. And I would get it to a degree if I truly thought that Canelo Alvarez was not facing some of the creme de la creme fighters out there. But basically the things that they're trying to allege is that Canelo Alvarez always avoids and ducks the top-tier competition. He always faces guys at their worst performances or at their worst, points in their career. And all that is just a bunch of horse shit. It just is what it is. But we're going to see what Mr. Boxing Ego has to say here. Let's get into it.
Wow. Brand new report comes out suggesting that Canelo can skip and not fight Jamal Charlo to do a two-fight deal with DAZN to fight Bivol. And then Triple G. Hey, no, guys. Hey, Max, big drama. Yeah, punches. What happened to Charlo? We're going to talk about all that and more in this video. Oh, my gosh. Stay tuned.
Well, hopefully, Mr. Ego, that is not you actually asking the legitimate question, because that would make you a gigantic hypocrite, which you already are anyway, because I know. But it is what it is. But basically, this is the same dude that just a week ago or a week and a half ago, whenever I reviewed that video, I'm not necessarily sure, he basically was the one that said that he did not want to see the, Canelo Alvarez versus Jamal Charlo fight at this point in time. He thinks that basically it has passed its course. Basically what he says is that he believes that Jamal Charlo, that not only is he now used to 168 pounds, but he doesn't think that Jamal Charlo is the same fighter. So if Canelo is going to move on from him and then face a Dmitry Bivol or a Gennady Golovkin in a trilogy, you should have no problem with it. Or at least overall, you should have no problem with the Dmitry Bivol fight. But anyway.
What up, Fight World? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing. Make sure you smash the like button. Listen, I'm like fine wine. They say I'm aging better with time. It looks like Ego Stradamus is on the verge of striking again with Canelo Alvarez. Before I get into that, y'all need to smash the like button and subscribe to the channel. This is the illest spot, the number one spot for all your boxing needs. Now, a report just came out today And we're going to take a look at that. Canelo Alvarez could be on the verge of a 2-fight deal. So says ESPN. Boom. I pulled it up for you guys. It says Canelo is nearing a deal to defend his 168-pound titles against Triple G in a long-awaited trilogy September 17th, sources tell Copperture. The trilogy is contingent on Canelo defeating Dmitry Bivol and Triple G beating Ryota Murata. Canelo versus Golovkin 3. Sources: Canelo Alvarez and Eddie Hearn are closing in on a 2-fight deal for the Stars' return to DAZN. Fight 1 would be Dmitry Bivol on May 7th, 175, and then Fight 2 with Gennady Golovkin September 17th at 168 pounds. Now, this is what I've already told you. Golovkin, oh my gosh. Let me just keep going because I'm about to go in. No agreement yet. Canelo and Triple G.
Yes, you are about to go in on that bullshit. But let's see overall what our friend Mr. Ego has to say.
Must both agree. All right. It says the 2-fight deal is upwards of $85 million. Upwards of $85 million allegedly. You know, if they can actually make the deal or whatever. Alvarez also mulled a 1-fight $45 million offer from PBC to fight Jamal Charlo. Could revisit Charlo if a deal falls apart at the 11th hour. Boom. We got action. Now, this is very atypical of Canelo Alvarez. Just when you think...
Well, what are you alleging overall is typical? Because once again, this is the same dude all in all that makes the same point. He made the same point in his last video that Canelo apparently would never in life, at least this is what he alleged, he would never overall go up to a higher weight class where someone was already majorly used to that division when he wasn't. Which, like I've already said, if you're trying to make that point, you obviously don't know shit about his career, don't know shit about boxing, because Canelo fought Gennady Golovkin, Miguel Cotto, and Danny Jacobs when they were much more experienced at the middleweight division than what Canelo Alvarez was. And when you also talk about the 168-pound division, he defeated Callum Smith, Caleb Plant, basically when they were much more experienced at that weight division. Now, Billy Joe Saunders, you would have a point there. But when it comes down to it, if you're talking about a lot of the fighters, and even Sergey Kovalev, if you want to mention him, all those fighters, if you're Mr. Ego here, and if you're trying to make the point that, oh, well, Canelo, he just fights guys that, they're not used overall to that weight. And he's going to try to make the same point with Gennady Triple G Golovkin. That, oh, why does Gennady Golovkin have to go up to 168? He's not used to that weight. Weren't you the same dude? And weren't these the same channels that were alleging that, Gennady Golovkin should have fought Andre Ward at 168 pounds? At the end of the day, if you're an elite fighter, you're supposed to be transcendent, not only within one weight division, but a few. All right, that's what the best of the best fighters do. That's why Canelo Alvarez is a 4-weight division champion.
The better fight is going to get made, and there's no problems. There were rumors that he was going to fight Charlo, which is clearly better than both of those fights to me, right? Especially here in America.
It's better than both of those fights, but yet you were saying that you did not want to see the fight. So why are you bitching? It just is what it is. Now, I think I understand overall what he means, that from a monetary perspective and in terms of how big the fight would be, yes, the fight probably would be better than overall what a Gennady Golovkin trilogy. Well, debatably, you never know. The Gennady Golovkin trilogy, there is still a lot of people that want to see that trilogy. I'm not really one of those people, but there is a certain amount of people that would want to see that. And on top of that, the Dmitry Bivol fight I still think would do decent views as well. Dmitry Bivol has a very great Olympic pedigree. He's a person that is bigger than Canelo. When it comes down to it, he's a person that has a great athleticism, a great power, very good feet, very good speed when it comes down to it. Dmitry Bivol would be no joke.
Like, what's the point of Canelo migrating to America and building his star power and amassing a following only to continue fighting European, Turkish, Kazakh fighters that really aren't big fights in America? You know what I mean? And I got so many things to break down. I'll probably have to split this into multiple videos. This is why you should subscribe to the channel for the latest and greatest, because it's going to take me a couple videos to get all my true thoughts out. But one early thought is this. What I tweeted. I said, funny, When Canelo versus Caleb Plant negotiations fell apart last September of last year, the Nello Man fans claimed it was Premier Boxing Champs, PBC, and Al Heyman's fault because they wanted to lock Canelo into a multi-fight deal, and Canelo only wanted to do the one-off fight with Caleb Plant and remain a free agent. Fast forward to today, with today's news that I just broke from the ESPN story, they're talking about a two-fight deal with DAZN for two Eastern European, Kazakhstan-type fights.
If you're basically trying to allege that Dmitry Bivol and Gennady Golovkin would be worse opponents because they're Caucasian fighters, I don't think overall that that's going to apply very well here. But we all know that these channels, they're full of bullshit. It just is what it is. But at the end of the day, Canelo Alvarez, he pretty much is his own boss, just like what Floyd Mayweather Jr. was at that point in time during his career, at the peak of his career. Canelo Alvarez, he's not chained down by anyone. No longer Oscar De La Hoya, not by Top Rank, not by PBC, not by DAZN. Canelo goes wherever he wants to go. It just is what it is. And basically, if you want him to sign with your promotion, which more than likely he's not going to do any more than a 2 or 3 fight deal at most, if you want him to sign with your promotion, you're going to have to give him something that he seems overall worth it, or that he thinks overall is going to do good for his career. Not only that, but give him a decent paycheck. And Canelo Alvarez, you pretty much are going to have to acquiesce to any of his demands. He is the main cash cow, and it's not even close.
And
there's no other star in the sport of boxing today that could do 900,000 pay-per-view buys against an opponent like a Caleb Plant. And Caleb Plant, in my opinion, very great opponent. It's just I did not think that, with his overall popularity, because he's not the most popular fighter, at least compared to a Charlo or maybe someone else out there, that maybe he could have fought. He's not even, what Gennady Golovkin was at his peak, of course. The fact that was able to do 900,000 pay-per-view buys, that really shows you the star power overall of a Canelo Alvarez.
This was the same commotion that PBC was blamed for Canelo Alvarez not getting cold feet in September. So to me, there's more than meets the eye. A lot of people...
And of course, I don't mind the PBC, but when it comes to Mr. Ego and a certain amount of these other LDBC channels especially, a lot of them are just PBC shills. It just is what it is. But anyway.
When Canelo did that, they speculated, like, was he on something and he needed more time? Things like that. So you open up those types of floodgates when you keep...
Once again, let me also talk about that as well, because there's been a certain amount of people that ask me, do you believe that Canelo Alvarez is still on steroids? And I've said many times, yeah, personally, I believe that he is on something, but I really don't care. It is what it is. And I know a certain amount of people that are going to have a problem with the way that I look at that. There's been a lot of fighters in the history of boxing that more than likely have been on something, some sort of performance-enhancing drug when they overall were pretty much at their prime. It just is what it is. Or overall, when performance-enhancing drugs pretty much, were at their peak use overall in boxing or in sports in general, which, usually seems to be maybe throughout the mid-90s all the way up till now. So it is what it is. Do I believe that Canelo more than likely is on something? Yes. Does that mean, in my opinion, that he's not a great fighter? No. And I know a lot of people that say, I had a person say in the comment section the other day, he basically said, oh, well, that does hurt his legacy that he's on steroids. No problem. But then say the same thing about Manny Pacquiao, say the same thing about Juan Manuel Marquez, say the same thing about Sugar Shane Mosley. If you watch UFC, say the same thing about Anderson Silva, John Jones. Stop counting those guys as all-time great fighters. Stop saying overall that those guys, that they're future Hall of Famers. Stop counting those guys as great fighters. If you think all in all that Canelo Alvarez should be penalized as much, no problem with that. No problem with that whatsoever. You have your right to your own opinion. But if you think all in all that it should happen with Canelo, overall treat Sugar Shane Mosley and a certain amount of those other fighters the same way.
Fidgeting with the dates. But that's a whole separate story. But nonetheless, the point remains what I said in that tweet is it's ironic that Canelo Alvarez man fans, they stand for him. They were being Canelo stands or whatnot, and they were like, oh, Canelo is Premier Boxing Champ's fault because they wanted to enter Canelo into a multi-fight deal, and he doesn't want that. He had a bad contract with Golden Boy and whoom. So at the end of the day,
he'll enter a multi-fight deal, but at the end of the day, it's going to be a multi-fight deal that is of his own choosing. Like I said, I don't think Canelo Alvarez wants to feel barred overall or basically in a cage to anyone. And basically when Oscar De La Hoya, when he basically promised DAZN that there would be a Gennady Triple G Golovkin trilogy, Canelo basically said, no, that's not what I wanted. And then so basically he got out of his Oscar De La Hoya promotion, he got out of Golden Boy, and then he got out of DAZN. So Canelo basically, he is going to face whoever the hell that he wants to. And I know there's going to be a certain amount of people that say, oh, well, he's doing that to face the weakest opposition. You can't be facing guys like Callum Smith, Caleb Plant, Danny Jacobs, and Gennady Triple G Golovkin, and then maybe potentially in his next fight, Dmitry Bivol, and be facing just the weakest of the weak. Like I said, there's a difference between Canelo and a Gervonta Tank Davis or what a Mikey Garcia was. Canelo was not doing that.
To remain a free agent. He doesn't want to be bogged down with multiple fights on his plate. He wants to go on a case-by-case basis. And then Canelo came back to PBC and back to the negotiations and did the Caleb Plant fight later in, I think, November of last year, but it still fell apart for September, and these was the reasons cited. So fast forward to the future, how is he doing a 2-fight deal with DAZN, but the same fan base, the same Canelo base, stated that Canelo wants to remain a free agent, so he doesn't want to commit like that. So that was all cap, because clearly he's willing.
Canelo, in my opinion, at this point in time in his career, he more than likely is not going to commit, at least exclusively, to any company unless it's just a 2 or 3 fight deal at most. I don't even know if he's going to do that anymore, but we'll see all in all what happens.
To do a multi-fight deal because he keeps doing it with DAZN if this report is true. So, in my opinion, I'm going to wait for Canelo to suggest what his next move is. I'll give him that benefit. I think he's owed that respect. But if these reports are true...
What do you mean that? You basically said that Canelo has a track record. You're Egostradamus. Isn't that correct? You get every single one of your predictions correct. You're a person that should be able to predict who Canelo Alvarez is facing next, before everyone else knows it. You know what ego is, with all the shit that he says about himself. For those of you overall that have ever watched the Harry Potter movies, because I've been watching some of them lately, there's this one overall, I believe, called The Chamber of Secrets, and the second one, there's this one Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher. I don't remember the dude's name, but basically he said that he can do all these things. He said that he's done all these things, all these adventures, all this shit, all that, and then basically come to find out in the end, he was just a gigantic phony. It is what it is. Come to find out, he never did any of the shit overall that he said. That's what ego reminds me of. He always says all in all, oh, I predicted this guy to win, I predicted this guy to win, I predicted this to happen, I predicted this to happen. It's like, I just have a hard time believing that you're getting every single one of these things right. Like, are you legitimately actually predicting that this specific thing is going to happen next and that this specific thing is going to happen next? Or are you basically saying that several different things could potentially happen and then one of those things do happen and then basically you say, oh man, I was right again? Don't get me wrong. If you can even predict possibly several things happening, that's great. But don't just sit here and act like that your prediction ratio was like 90% or all this other bullshit. Like, come on.
Oh, there's going to be a lot of...
Like I said, there's a difference overall in actually making a prediction. Like, if I were to make a Super Bowl prediction, and this is what a lot of people love to do, when it comes down to it, they don't make a real, actual prediction. What they basically do is just say, oh, well, I think that both of them have a chance. But they'll say it in a way to where basically they say, yeah, like, let's say if I were to talk about the Super Bowl, I'm predicting the LA Rams to win the Super Bowl. But at the end of the day, in my video, if you looked at it, I said that the Cincinnati Bengals, in my opinion, I would give them a good 45 to 50% chance because I think they're a lot tougher than what a lot of people give them credit for. Now, that's like if the Cincinnati Bengals won the Super Bowl and I was like, oh man, I was right all along. I was right all along. The Cincinnati Bengals won the Super Bowl. I was right on the money. I can't claim that I was 100% right on the money because I predicted the LA Rams to win the Super Bowl. If the Bengals win the Super Bowl. You see what I mean? That's what 90% of people do. When it comes down to it, they don't give actually an exact prediction. They just overall tell you several different things that can happen. And then one of those things happen and they're like, oh man, I was right on the money. No, dude, when it came down to it, you didn't overall lock down on an exact prediction. You didn't get shit right. It is what it is. At least overall, not 100%. Those people always annoy me when it comes down to it anyway.
Videos. There's going to be a lot of slow singing and flower bringing if my burglar alarm starts ringing. Oh, I can't wait. But I'll wait for Canelo. Listen, I'm gonna be a nice guy here. I'm gonna be a nice guy. I'm gonna wait for Canelo to decide, and once it's official, and if this is true, and he's going to DAZN, then it's on. And y'all, I'm about to release the Krakens. Let's get it. I'm West Side. I promise you. I promise you, we coming. Yeah. So, cause that it's cap. Just when you think he's gonna fight a guy like Charlo, something like this comes up, and this is typical.
But you said all in all that Canelo Alvarez, that you don't want him facing Charlo. So once again, ego has proved to us to again, and it's no offense against this dude. People with their own platform, I think that that's a great thing, but it's just hard to me to respect a channel like this or Ego or a Dante's Boxing Nation or Aki TV, because these dudes, man, they're just they're just such bitches. It just it is what it is. I'm not trying to be rude. I'm not trying to tear anyone down at the end of the day, but it's like, come on, man. When you actually give that much energy and hating a person that bad when it comes down to it, overall, basically what you are is basically a fan of that person. You're just turned inside out. You're known as a hater. It is what it is, but you're a secret, deep down fanboy. It is what it is. I don't think it's a good idea overall to put that much energy in any person when it comes down to it, especially if you're overall just an alleged fan when it comes down to of an athlete. But it is what it is. Anyway.
Canelo fashion. So it's not surprising if it does play out like this. Another thing, one of two things are happening here. One, this is serious, and Canelo, this is really the option that he's leaning towards, because that's not surprising if you know Canelo's track record. Or two, he is using the two companies, pitting them against each other, and then false showing interest in the DAZN deal, like, oh, I'm about to commit, to try to get PBC to jog up the price. And I hope Premier Boxing Champions are smart enough to take this into consideration, this possibility. Because
So is that your Ego Stradamus prediction? Because like I said, what Ego does, he doesn't really make a specific prediction usually. All he does basically is say that this could happen, this could happen, this could happen, this could happen. He basically tells you all the possibilities that are already out there, and then basically one of them happens, and he's like, man, I basically got that correct. It's like, okay, dude, what, whatever. Like I said, he's like that one Harry Potter character, that one professor in the second movie that turned out to be a complete phony. That's what he reminds me of. You ever met a person like that? They allege that basically they've done all these things. You ever met a person that says, basically they've done shit that just always seemed to be completely unbelievable? They trained with a celebrity, or they did this, they did that. I had a friend like that in high school. Me and my good friend in high school, he was a track athlete. And another one of my friends was a track athlete as well. One of my friends said all in all that apparently he trained in Atlanta with Usain Bolt overall to practice with him. He would say all these things, that he got a specific record overall with his running time and this and this and that, but it would never show up in results. He never had any proof of it. It's like, you know what? Ain't no one want to hear you shit, bro.
that's the oldest trick in the book, to get two different.
But in terms of talking about the PBC overall, possibly getting tricked, listen, at the end of the day, Canelo Alvarez is the main golden goose. And unless it is completely unrealistic, you're basically going to have to acquiesce to Canelo Alvarez's demands. It just is what it is.
Sides and play those sides against each other.
And, basically what I'll say is that, on a certain amount of people, they may disagree with that, but at the end of the day, there's exceptions for exceptional people. And Canelo Alvarez is not only an exceptional fighter, but he's a person all in all that when you take a look at his brand, he has an overly exceptional brand. Like I said, he got 900,000 pay-per-view buys with his last fight.
You see what I'm saying? You even see this on movies where, a bad guy will talk to the Crips and then say, oh, the Bloods are saying this about you, blah, blah, blah. And then go over to the Bloods and then say, oh, the Crips is doing this. And then what happens is you create this, this war, basically, and then you just get out the way of the crossfire. And the same thing could be for a bidding war. You can play both sides, say, oh, hey, PBC, you better up the price, or I'm not fighting Charlo. I'll just go over to DAZN and fight Triple G and fight Bivol. But my thing is this: the amount of money and the numbers that are being thrown out here, I think they should let Canelo leave. I think $45 million for.
They can let Canelo leave. Canelo don't care. It's no problem, because Canelo, I think that there's a part of him that wants to face Jamal Charlo, but if he did not face Jamal Charlo, I don't think that he would lose any sleep over it. Because I don't, Canelo, in terms of a monetary perspective, I think that he does want that fight. But when he takes a look at Jamal Charlo, do I think that he believes that it's going to be someone that is any more than a Gennady Golovkin or, some of the other wins that he got in his career? No, not really.
Charlo is an amazing.
But I think that Canelo will take that fight eventually, because he knows that Jamal Charlo is going to be remembered on his resume, because he's not necessarily someone that, in terms of boxing ability, that I would put above a Caleb Plant or Billy Joe Saunders or Danny Jacobs or someone of that sort. But at the end of the day, he is someone that is a little bit more popular than some of those fighters. So I think that Canelo eventually is going to want to face him.
opportunity and deal because the most
So
important
do I think that there is a possibility that maybe Canelo was trying to play or overall pimp PBC right now? Who knows? It's possible.
thing, it's a bigger fight. So Canelo would definitely. I'm not the smartest brother in the world, but I know, and I really
I find that very apparent. No offense. It just is what it is.
truly believe he'll get something on the back end because that would clearly be a pay per view. So that deal is ultimately worth more than like in one fight you can make more because it's such a great fight with Charlo, and you have great fan bases. You can make more in that one fight than perhaps you can do in this 2-fight deal because the zone they don't have a bankable established pay per view like economy or system. PBC, they already have that. They already have that facilitated. I mean, of course,
Well, the PBC, if you're trying to argue that they're that much more above the zone, I'm not really sure. I don't know overall what completely is going on behind the scenes. But the PBC has seemed to somewhat struggle a little bit as of lately as well. I mean, their last pay per view was Keith Thurman versus Mario Barrios for $75, and when I no one wanted to see that fight. And basically, all in all, my Nostradamus prediction, I guess, if I want to say that, although anyone could have fucking seen that coming. No one wanted to really see that fight. I ended up buying it anyway just because there wasn't really anything else on that weekend. But when it came down to it, if you actually watched the seats or if you looked at the seats, like three-fourths of the people weren't even in the seats.
Canelo's last
So is it possible that maybe PBC is struggling a little bit? Maybe. We'll see what happens.
fight with Caleb Plant was on pay per view, so they have more weapons in that regard. So we'll wait and see what Canelo decides. But I got so much stuff to say. Like who's really expecting and hyped for the Canelo versus Triple G fight? Please let me know that. Please let me know because
Right, but you say all in all that right now that you think that Canelo versus Jamal Charlo should happen. But then in your last video, you basically said that you didn't want it to happen. So like I said, there's no offense against Ego, but he's just got a lot of bitch energy towards Canelo Alvarez because he don't like him. He don't like him. He don't want him to be the number one pound for pound fighter. He don't want to see his face across the boxing boards. He just don't like him. It is what it is. I get your point to a degree. I don't think that the Gennady Golovkin trilogy fight is really something that would appeal a lot to me, but it is something that overall I probably would watch. I know that it's something that a lot of people would watch, especially if Gennady Golovkin were to unify the belts against Ryota Murata. I believe is that one Japanese fighter's name. And if Canelo were able to defeat that of a Dmitry Bivol, and if they were able to have their trilogy fight, I think you could do maybe anywhere from 800,000, who knows, maybe even to 1 million, buys or views, depending on whether it's a pay-per-view or not, which with the zone it doesn't seem like it would be, but we'll see.
because at this point, at this space of time, Triple G didn't fight all of last year. He had 0 fights, 0. So he's inactive. Before that, after the Canelo 2 loss, he took like a year plus off, came back and he's taking weak fights. And the only fight where he fought somebody worth the damn is Derevyanchenko, and he should have lost that fight. Now he's 40 years old.
I think that the Derevyanchenko fight was close, but I would somewhat agree with Ego. What I'll say is this: Gennady Golovkin, in my opinion, he pretty much is a shell of what he was.
41 years old or pushing 40.
But that tells you all in all their opinion overall about Canelo. Because, like I said, these guys have been pushing for Jamal Charlo versus Gennady Golovkin for a very long time. But then when Canelo Alvarez goes after that trilogy, they basically say that it's weak sauce. And I get it to a degree, but basically what that's you admitting is that Charlo ain't on that Canelo level.
Or whatever.
And that that he's not on that level.
The case is, right? And so inactivity, pushing 40, weak performances. Like he didn't look the same versus Sesmeta. Sesmeta got no power, got no pop, bro. Like an empty vending machine, he ain't got no pop. That's a bar. Write it down, right? So,
Oh man.
so it took several rounds for Golovkin to get Sesmeta out of there, and he was just a guy surviving with no experience, no pop, and off heart or whatever, and somewhat of durability. And as I mentioned, Derevyanchenko fight, Triple G got cooked. He got cooked. And then before that, he fought Steve Rose, and he was even getting tagged in that fight. Now you want a 40-year-old Triple G, roughly, a 40-year-old Triple G who's been roughly
Right, but he's also going to face out of a Dmitry Bivol. So I was like, come on, dude.
inactive to come up to 168. The first 2 fights,
Why do you keep bringing up the point that he has to come up to 168? Gennady Golovkin is a big middleweight. He's a person that may even be a little bit naturally bigger than Canelo. So it just is what it is. Once again, would these guys ever say the same shit if, overall there was a fighter that they didn't like overall that had to come up and they basically said, oh, well, why don't you face someone that, at 135 or, like let's say overall, for example, if Oscar Valdez somehow beat Shakur Stevenson and Oscar Valdez said that he didn't want to face Devin Haney next, would Boxing Eagle be making these same points? I highly doubt it. And like I said, if you're really going to make the same point overall that, oh, well, Canelo, he only faces guys that, he would never face a guy that was really, really good and already had a multitude of fights, at that weight division, at a higher weight division when he hasn't, that doesn't make any sense. Because the Sergey Kovalev fights, the overall Gennady Triple G Golovkin fights, the Miguel Cotto, the Danny Jacobs fights, the Callum Smith, the Caleb Plants fights, those tell us different.
Dub, that fight's trash. The first two fights were at 160. Now Canelo has way more experience as a whole, but definitely more experience in the 160 plus weights. He fought Julio Cesar.
Right, but come on, dude. Canelo Alvarez, and I get your point to a degree. At times, if you're talking about maybe like a Vasyl Lomachenko versus Guillermo Rigondeaux situation, that would make sense. Because Lomachenko is a person to where if Guillermo Rigondeaux was even going to have a chance, Lomachenko is probably going to have to go down even to probably 126. But when it came down to it, this is not a similar thing because it would be a 168. If Gennady Golovkin is a person that is really that transcendent, now, of course, at this point, I don't think I'll know that he's going to stand much of a chance because he's a little bit too old. But if you're a person that is supposed to be a transcendent fighter, if you just move up one weight class, you're supposed to at least have a decent chance against any of the fighters there.
Chavez Jr., 164.
And I think that Gennady, once upon a time, he was a transcendent fighter. I just don't think that he is any longer. I don't think that the Canelo versus Gennady Golovkin trilogy is necessarily horrible, but it's just not a fight, all in all, in my opinion, that would be as good as a Jamal Charlo fight, just in terms of a monetary perspective. In terms of competitiveness, I think that both Golovkin, this is the weakest version of Golovkin that I've seen. The best version of Charlo, in my opinion, he pretty much has the same chance over Canelo as what the weakest version of Gennady Golovkin has, in my opinion. But it is what it is. Anyway.
He had Rocky Fielding fights. He had a Kovalev fight at 175. He was even entertaining the Makbuk Air at cruiserweight. So he's clearly had.
Well, hey, that should be a banger, according to you, because Makabu, he has much more experience at cruiserweight. But anyway. But, of course, I get it when it comes down to, like I said, Makabu, he's not necessarily an A-grade fighter. But what if you're just asking me personally, what fight would I like to see personally next? I would have liked to see the Canelo versus Jamal Charlo fight. But if Canelo does face that of a Dmitry Bivol next, I can't necessarily, bark at him when it comes down or basically say that he's avoiding top-tier competition. Because Dmitry Bivol, in my opinion, like I've said repeatedly, there's only two possible 50-50 fights, in my opinion, that Canelo Alvarez has for himself out there. One is either Beterbiev, the other one is Dmitry Bivol.
Time to acclimate with the Caleb Smith, Billy Joe Saunders, Caleb Plant type fights at the higher weights. Triple G has no relevant fights at 168 pounds. Trash. Drop your thoughts in the comment section.
Right, but Canelo Alvarez, he had no relevant fights at 168 before he fought really Callum Smith. I mean, he beat Rocky Fielding, but is Rocky Fielding really someone that's A-grade? So it is what it is. What I'll say is this. I don't think that that's the best of points really to make because I think that it's a dumb point. But you could make the point that Gennady Golovkin, that he pretty much is toast. He pretty much is French toast. He's cooked. He's not really the same fighter that he used to be. But it still may have a lot of appeal. A lot of people, of course, believe that Gennady Golovkin not only won the first fight, but also possibly won the second fight as well. So I could somewhat see the trilogy maybe having some sort of appeal, but we'll see all in all what happens.
I can't wait. Canelo, make your decision, boy. Hit him out.
Yeah, you can't wait because you're overall going to have that bitch-ass energy and criticize Canelo no matter who he faces next. Like I said, this dude, he is a secret fan of Canelo Alvarez, just like a lot of these other channels are. But it is what it is.
The future.
But anyways, that's pretty much about it for this video. I just thought that I would review that and spread the news and also, review this video, which I thought was very particularly interesting. But like I said, these channels, they're never going to be happy with Canelo because they don't like him. It is what it is. But it's whatever. But anyways, that's overall pretty much about it for today. But this is why I say that Canelo, in my opinion, that he has to be the number one pound-for-pound fighter. Because the only other fighters that I've seen with these type of expectations upon their shoulders have been the true number one pound-for-pound fighters. Basically, like I said, Canelo, he can go anywhere from 160 to basically 200 pounds and be favored in pretty much every single fight. And then basically people will still allege that he's allegedly avoiding top-tier fights, even when he's going to face Dmitry Bivol next, allegedly. So like I said, there is no other fighters overall besides the number one pound for pound fighter that has that type of expectations on their shoulders. Would people actually ask Terrence Bud Crawford to move up to 160 and actually face a Jamal Charlo or Demetrius Andrade and actually beat them? Not a lot of people would ask that. Would people actually ask, overall Alexander Usyk to realistically beat Tyson Fury? Not a lot of people would ask that. That's how you know that, now of course there's a much bigger size differential there than what some of the other ones that I mentioned, but you know what I mean. But that's why Canelo, in my opinion, he has to be the number one pound for pound fighter. Because the expectations upon his shoulders, it screams Manny Pacquiao. It screams Floyd Mayweather Jr., Roy Jones Jr. That's how you know that he is the number one pound for pound fighter. But that pretty much is about it for me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you all later. And we will see where this goes.